Welcome to the Wisdom Check by Tabletop to Keyboard. This is going to be our bi-weekly podcast where we discuss things such as Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, I think maybe we need to turn up my mic a little bit, guys. How about some more game? More game. This is so This is the intro to end all intros. Talk about Dungeons, Dragons, and
Now, I don't think that's proper. This is a family show after all. This is the intro we can use, fellas. It's good, clean fun for everyone. Welcome to the Wisdom Check, where we have wholesome conversations about the dilemmas we face every day.
Nah, hold on a second. I got your intro right here. Yeah, that's better. Welcome to the Wisdom Check. Well, I'm right, Jeff's wrong. We're gonna have guests on to talk about it. It's gonna be awesome, because I said so.
He is right. He did say so. I don't know. Is surf music the best music for a podcast about D&D?
Fuck yeah.
Okay.
This just in, nobody can agree on our intro for this podcast. So we're just going to start. Welcome to the Wisdom Check. Roll for initiative. Fuck. A 1. It's like every time.
Hello and welcome to the Wisdom Check. Now this is part 2 of our lovely talk with dadbod DnD's favorite DM Bob. And if you missed the first part, go back and check it out. We talked extensively about one-shot campaigns, which dadbod DnD is the king of. And we ended with an important announcement that you guys are going to enjoy as well. So if you missed that at the end of the last one, well, shame on you. But don't worry, I'll add it here at the front of this episode so you can enjoy. Now we get into a different topic this time around. And that topic is about player-owned property and assets. So whether that's tames, mounts, houses, that kind of stuff, how do you deal with them? What do you do with them? How do you interact with them as a DM or as a player? So look forward to that conversation. Now, one piece of technical note here, our tech guy was out for this evening, and we had to do a little last-minute put together of the technical side of things. And unfortunately, we got a lot of hissing out of one of the microphones. Sorry, I'm going to try to clean it up as much as I can here, but it's going to be a little annoying. This is a one-time deal, so sorry about that, but that's what it is. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into that announcement. Get hyped. Get excited. I am. Well, I feel like I want to make that announcement now. Do you think it's good timing? We've delayed it long enough? Apparently Dustin's mic is not picking up his words, but I think he mouthed yes.
He's like, yes, I want you to do that right now.
Oh, you got me?
So,
yeah, go ahead. I'm going to let you have.
So for the chat that may not have been here at the start, I teased that we had a big announcement that I was hoping not to jinx myself on. And that's that we're branching out a little bit on our guest list. And we've had some phenomenal guests, including the one we're talking to right now. People in our group and building a community at our local level. But through some miracle of networking and just having friends in the right places, we've got Satine Phoenix coming on our show August 12th. And if you don't know who she is, Satine Phoenix was previously a community manager for Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons farm, between 2018 and 2019. And she's on a lot of the big stuff. She's been doing a lot of these shows that are connected to the Matt Mercer fan clubs and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I cannot believe that this has happened, but I've got confirmation emails from her assistant saying that's going to occur. And unless the floor falls out from underneath us, that's a thing.
That's
and
so
we've
awesome.
got some others in the works potentially too. I'm not going to put the names out, but if they come through...
That's not the only one we've got lined up that might be a big deal. So
we've got a couple huge names.
And you could say, Bob, you were here first.
Yes! Nailed it!
So, yeah, I'm super pumped about this. I think it's it's an opportunity for us to really kind of push our community as a whole up. Because if we get noticed, through that, we're going to get a lot more people coming in here, and we're going to be pointing them to some of the other channels that we're associated with. And, that's going to be an opportunity to make a big splash. So we're thinking about how we want to handle that when it comes down the pipe. And, depending on how many people are really excited about interacting and asking questions and things, we may have to come up with a system to deal with that. But yeah, super excited.
Dude, that's going to be awesome. I will say, part of me is jealous because when I'm learning how to DM, she took over the Geek and Sundry DM Dungeon Master's Corner, and she does a great job of it.
Oh, yeah.
You have big shoes to fill when it was Matt Mercer, but
yeah,
she did it, and it was great. I love everything she's put out.
Yeah, she's putting out great content, and it's freaking amazing that she's kind of bringing a different style to gaming. It's allowing kind of the rock star attitude, I guess, into gaming, and it's just freaking cool. And like I said, she's connected to a lot of interesting people out there doing some really amazing things. So I don't know. I'm trying not to get too pumped in case it doesn't happen for sure. I'm like 99% sure it's going to happen, but the pessimist in me is freaking out a little bit.
Right now, the TT2KB model is just stay calm and keep streaming. That's what we're doing for right now. Is stay calm, keep streaming.
Fake it till you make it, and then you're there and you made it. You got it.
Absolutely. Woo! So that's out of the bag.
Now that we finally let Jeff get his announcement out that we've been wanting to say for a while now, we can move on into the second half of our show tonight here with Bob from dadbod DnD, and we wanted to talk a little bit about your Waterdeep game. The reason why I bring this up is because you guys are running a module right now for your game. You're doing Dragon Heist. And I've seen Dragon Heist done on a few other channels. But what makes your guys' game special, in my opinion, and we talked about this a little bit before we went live, was just how comfortable your group is literally just sitting in the middle of a module and deciding they're just going to roleplay for a whole session. Like, there's no urgency necessarily to push towards what's the next plot hook in this thing, where's the next map, where are we going to next. They're real comfortable sitting there just having a conversation with themselves in their quote-unquote house thing they have, because for those of you, I don't want to spoil Waterdeep Dragon Heist too much, but early on you get property, and that's why we're going to talk about player-owned assets here in a little bit too, because and how that can help you with this. But so how do you, as a DM running this module, are there things you do to kind of help with that, or is that just naturally them? Or do you feel the urge to push them a little, or do you just no, this is great, just let it go?
A little of all three of those things, in the fact that I do help prep it. When we set up for Waterdeep, we learned a lot from Tomb of Annihilation. In the fact that we learned that we are a very RP heavy group. So Tomb of Annihilation at the very end was brutal in the fact that we're not dungeon crawlers. You could put RP in there. We did put RP in there. There was a pretty emotional NPC death that we had that we got probably good couple sessions of roleplay from.
Oh wow!
But it doesn't. Tomb of Annihilation does not translate well to a full roleplay group. It is, it's a dungeon crawler, and every single room step, you're doing something to make sure you're not dying. We're now moving into Waterdeep. You're in a city, you can really do whatever you want. There's no set timer. There's no time. There's no urge to push it. So when we learned a lot from Tomb, when we went into Waterdeep, we had months of character creation. We had months of backstory kind of going back and forth. They share all their backstories with me. There are some parts that they don't want to share with everybody in the party. And Ink, I'm gonna say it's not, but we'll talk about that in a second. But so we had all of this prep time, knowing that that's where we're going next. And with that done, we already had the basis and the building blocks of this great roleplay group. Now, when you're in Waterdeep, you can just let them kind of go in the fact that, not to spoil it, if you don't like spoilers, maybe take your earphones off for a second. But you do get a house, and you do get, well, if the players accept it, you get a house. If not, you could skip that whole chapter. But if you want, that whole chapter is so open-ended in the fact that you can take as long as you want to rebuild this place and make it a like a functioning bar. You can make it a restaurant. You can make it whatever you want. And so that just lends itself to roleplay anyways. And why I said I'm going to challenge Ian, Tomb is first and foremost a crawl, yes and no. Chapters 1 through 3 is not. Chapters 1 through 3, you're absolutely roleplay heavy in the fact that you're in Port Nyanzaru and you can do whatever you want. You can dino race, you can go to Fort Belrain, and you could go to, you could have the political intrigue that is with all of these merchant princes that are there, and it is a roleplay heavy there. And then, yes, when you're traveling, it does have a hex crawl, which our group just said we're done with. We're going to do it our own way because hex crawls are atrocious.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
In my opinion, and some may like it, but that's just me.
Not my cup of tea.
But then chapters 3 and 4, you can roleplay that pretty heavily because you get to meet, spoilers, some Yuan Ti that are in the lost city of Mesro, I believe.
You just lost your cred. It's right out.
It's not Mesro. What is it? I cannot remember it.
It's gonna leave you hanging.
You either, it looks like.
I know you are, and I hate it so much. We didn't go to Mesro.
Maybe the chat will save you.
The chat. I don't think the chat's saving him. Nope, they're leaving him out to dry.
But that's fine. You can roleplay there with the Yuan Ti that are in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we did skip that part very quickly. They did not hang out with Ross and me in there. They're just like, nope, we're moving on. Anyways, so yes and no. It's a dungeon crawl at the very, very, very end of the module, but at the very start, it has so much room for roleplay.
It's really up to the group, I think, to take advantage of that. I didn't quite hear what you just said there.
I gotta look it up now because I completely forgot.
He's going to the Google here. He's going to look it up.
Google's important, folks.
Yep.
So we were talking about property, right? So this is something that came up recently in the Critical Role. Recently, I say it because I'm behind a bunch of episodes. But they got property, and they did in the first season and in the second season. And it sounds like you get some property in these modules that you're running. And it can be done a lot of different ways. Like I think in Pathfinder, in the Kingmaker campaign, obviously, that's an entire module about running a kingdom, and like conquering a land and building stuff up on it and having kind of customization. Now, I feel like if your group is a type of group that is interested in micromanaging and developing the game world, I guess, then building up these structures and stuff should have a lot of impact and a lot of weight. And there should be, things that interact with that thing that they're creating, for better or for worse. And I guess the question comes down to, beyond just like what your gaming group's into, what should the vulnerabilities of that place be? Like, I know we dealt a lot with that in Larp, and I'll let our guest kind of chime in before we talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, the number one vulnerabilities in this module of the house that they have is the fact that there is a competing vendor in the area, and so now you're not this niche in the giant town of Waterdeep because there's 100,000 bars that you can go to. If you're going to create a bar, you better figure out who your competitors are and are they okay with you doing it right there. And then Waterdeep has a lot of guilds. So a lot of like crafting guilds and, just various, in my Discord, there's probably 100. But if you're not, and it works like the laborers. So the labor unions here in America, if you're not using them, you kind of get, you're called a scab, you're whatever you are. it works the same way in Waterdeep. So you better be careful in the decisions that you do make, because it does have consequences.
Just giving Dustin a chance to chime in since he's on the push to talk tonight.
Yeah, well, I'm always on push to talk, but I'm on unmute myself and then push to talk, so it's like a two-step process to speak tonight. So, one of the things that's interesting is, like you talked a little bit earlier about having player agency, and sometimes I think that sometimes the property can really add to that. Like, because now they own this thing and it's in this town, right? And it gives them all these different avenues, like you said, to work with guilds, to work with, I mean, sometimes it's almost like I've seen like some parts of some of your games where it's almost like a Better Homes and Gardens sort of thing, where it's like, what kind of couch is going to complete our living room? And the next session, it's almost like it's like Bob Vila. You got to fix some things that were broken when you got the place, and then it's like, you go through and then it's almost other times like a reality show, like Big Brother, where they're all like in this house and they're just learning how to live with each other to a degree. Like you go through all those steps of like those kind of things that happen, and that's what's amazing, I think, watching it, because I've seen Waterdeep done a few different channels. I've never seen people so willing to do that part of it, like your group does. I think it's amazing. It's one of the reasons why I love watching your guys' episodes. Like, I mean, you guys could be in this thing for a long time compared to what I think some other people have done with Dragon Heist. So,
if you haven't caught the latest episode, it was the exposition episode of the module, and there was just, the plot laid out finally, and they touched the right thing to get it to trigger. But just like our Christmas one shot, we could go on and on with just roleplay, as none of us have any of this improv acting, but a lot of my DM prep for this group is on the spot. Because, okay, yes, I do have a loose framework of how this whole module works together, but a lot of it's on the spot because I have no idea where my group wants to go. I have no idea if they want to sit here and, talk to this fucking... Sorry if...
Go for it, man.
We've done worse.
We have it right in the intro.
Talk to this ghost for 3 hours in the rundown hovel that they have, or whether or not they want to actually go and do the quest that they have. I mean, I kind of let it just go in the fact that, whatever they want to do.
Yeah, you have to be good at improv to be a good DM. Like, you can be a passable DM without it, I guess, but if you want to be a good DM, you have to develop that skill. And the develop is the important keyword there, because I don't know anybody that's just natively a good improv person, I mean, even though we do it 24/7 of our lives, but when you suddenly are aware that you're improving, people tend to freak out until they get some practice at it.
Absolutely.
And, man, DMing is definitely a good way to learn it.
One of the problems we've always had with like player property and assets in D&D kind of throughout history is that at some point or another, you got to leave it behind. Like the classic example in old school D&D, before 5th ed, was paladins, right? Paladins always got their bonded mount. So at one level, paladin gets a horse. You head down into the dungeon. Horse can't fit. Tie horse up at the beginning of the dungeon. Hope your bonded mount doesn't die when you come back out later alive, right? Like, so that was that's in the old school D&D. That was like people's first real, I suppose, probably experience with a lot of player assets was when just owning horses and coming out and finding your horses have been eaten by dragons or wolves or whatever because you tied them up. So do you feel like with this player-owned property that you guys have, things like that, like do you have problems with the players like wanting to leave it behind because they're worried something will happen to it while they're gone? Like, have you ran into that a little bit?
My players are terrible at any property they have. And Kylie, she had a couple Commodon pets that she found as little kittens, and 10 sessions later she's like, oh, I totally forgot about those. Well, you're in the Tomb of Annihilation, they're probably dead. You haven't fed them. They're you check in their bag, they're dead. But they're so terrible at it, and I guarantee once we move past Troll Skull Manor chapter, they're going to completely forget about it, and it'll be like, nobody's taking care of it, so it's infested with rats. It's run down. It's been broken into. All the copper's stolen out of the, I mean, they're so terrible. I just kind of let them go with it. I mean, if it were a different group, I would say probably should deal with this. But today we'll let it.
Nice. It looks like J Brews just gifted a tier 1 sub to dadbod DnD. It's their first gift sub in the channel. Thanks, buddy.
Jay Brews, that's awesome of you, man.
Hey, thanks, J Bruce. I can say it to you and type it to you.
Yeah, I think in this topic, it really comes down to a couple things. I mean, obviously, it's your players and like what they're doing and what they find interesting, and then I think the other part of it is what their history with DMs is. Like early on in D&D, when we were kids, it seemed like our DMs were just head hunting every mount we ever had. It was every environment you went into, you couldn't bring your horse, and then immediately wolves, giants, goblins, something would eat your horse. No chance that thing's gonna be alive when you come back.
Now I do have to say though, I don't feel like it was just us, because paladins can literally summon it out of thin air now. Like, I really feel like that spell and the way that ability works now is because of 20 years of history of paladins getting their class feature killed every time they came out of the dungeon. So I feel like they over the top, like, you know what, we're finally just going to make it a spell. And if it dies for any reason, they just summon it right back. Like, I feel like that was kind of why that came about.
Yeah, because nobody wants to invest something into things that are going to be easily removed. And that's something we ran into in the Larp world. In Larp, a lot of times, in the live-action vampire game we did, it seemed like people avoided developing contacts, having mortal allies, having assets and things because, well, lo and behold, in a PvP kind of game, people go after those things and destroy them, or use them as ransom and make interesting story things happen that makes them vulnerable and have the feels. And nobody wants to do that because that would make a good game experience.
And it was exceptionally bad in LARP because when we ran a vampire LARP, and vampires own havens. That's where they sleep during the day. So everyone has a haven. The question is how hard is it for anyone else to get in there and kill you while you're sleeping? And so in a PvP environment, and that's where, as a storyteller, I got myself in trouble one time because I ran this one super secret vampire group, and they're in the book. It says that they will go get the biggest door they can find and use it for the door to their communal haven. And so they literally went and robbed a bank and just took the bank vault door. They didn't take the money. They didn't take any of those. They just took the bank vault door, and everyone was all the players were investigating. And then once they found out it was Death Trap Dungeon behind that bank vault door where they found it eventually, then everyone's like, so can we make our havens as cool as you made that one? I was like, no, you can't. Because that's a DM special, my friend. You're all screwed. Go back to regular haven rules.
Yeah, but I think there is something interesting there because a lot of times as a DM, when you have something like that the characters care about, and I guess in 5th Ed it would be your bond. It's like a family member, or an item, an heirloom, or something. Something that's important to the character. Obviously, you want to utilize that as a plot point at some point, and typically plots involve some kind of risk or some kind of threat. And it's a delicate thing to deal with because players have a hard time with that, whether they feel like it's inbounds to mess with their stuff or they don't. And this is a tricky topic. How do you address that?
It's tough. So in Tomb of Annihilation, everybody had a backstory and everybody had an idea of where they came from. And I try to pull heavily from people's backstories because it gives them the chance to really shine and show who this character is that they've spent so much time being. Mm-hmm. Specifically, Binks, one of our characters, he was a part of this group of bandit street urchin children that was in I want to say Neverwinter. I believe that's what it was. That would just rob people. And so he was called by Syndra, who is the first quest giver. He was called by her to help do this. So clearly she called some of his other companions, and he found one of his other companions in the jungle And so it became this bond he had. He had to save me and rescue him.
Mhm.
I had a particularly dark stretch of game where they were being chased by an Oni, and the Oni
Nasty.
caught this other, whatever, it was the Bay Harbor kid is what they were called, caught him, killed him, and Predator style kind of filleted him and took his skin, right? But that was such this bond that he had that I went after him. And as a DM, I try not to do that very often because it just makes you feel bad. It just kind of makes you feel like, oh, screw this guy. Why do I want to do that? But it was fitting, and it you have to pick the right time and the right moment to do it.
Yeah, because you don't want it to feel like you got assassinated by the DM, and it's a fine line between doing that right and doing it wrong.
Along those lines, I have a question for you.
Sure.
How do you feel are you DM is pro player or anti-player?
How do you mean that?
So,
As in, is it his job to go after players or work with them? I think is what it means.
Are you antagonistic or cooperative? Yeah, I mean, I think in a good, healthy table, your DM should be cooperative. Like, you should be facilitating an interesting challenge for the players, but you should never be rooting for yourself to win. You want to push them. You want there to be risk involved. You want them to have, consequences for their actions and things. But the second your DM is out there headhunting players and out to see them fail and stuff, that's a table that should not exist. Unless that's specifically what the gaming group's asking for.
I agree.
Death
It
Trap
is
Dungeon or something.
I do not run that kind of game. I try to be as pro player as possible. There are rules that, yes, unfortunately, I will put my foot down and say, this is the rule of the game, we're going to follow it, and you got to abide by that. But I have played in a game where I was a PC and the DM was so bad at trying to just, he's going to pick your flaws and he's going to go after them. He also played with his wife, too, and he would always make it 10 times harder for her. And it was so DM versus player that it was so toxic, and you're like,
Yeah, that is a recipe for disaster unless you have a very specific group that's very clear on what they're looking for. Because, like I said, if you have a Death Trap Dungeon, DM is definitely out to kill you.
Yeah.
And if you sign up for Death Trap Dungeon,
You know what you're
you're
getting.
ready. If you go find your experience, that's what you're there for.
Yeah.
You're going to die, and maybe you'll succeed. But
Yeah.
in a campaign or something with friends, like there to have fun, that's not that. Like, don't do that.
I write my bad guys and my dungeons and stuff very anti-player, and then when I run the session, I'm so pro-player it isn't funny. Like, I'll write my material one way, and then when I get in there, I'm like, come on, guys, you can beat this stuff. I believe in you. Like, I'll give you everything you need to make sure you get through this, but, if it goes down bad, it goes down bad. That way I feel like I make sure I'm challenging them properly. Like, I hate when I'm writing the content to be so player friendly that I'm like, oh, I don't want to challenge them, or I want to make sure they live. Like, I don't want that to be too much of a focus when I'm writing the material, like especially antagonistic material. So I guess for me, I waver back and forth when I'm creating a bit, I guess.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a little bit in the character death episode. But if you're running a scene and you're playing it true to form, like, oh, I'm playing an assassin, he's going to wait until you're asleep, and then he's going to slit your throat, and it's a coup de grace. Nobody's around to see you. It's over. No player's going to enjoy that. Your gaming group's just going to be like, what? This is stupid. I had no choice in this. There's nothing I could do about it. You literally made the character sheet, so you did this intentionally. That's going to create a really bad experience, and the players are not going to enjoy that death. At least I wouldn't,
no, absolutely not.
So, I think that's, you got to be cooperative as a DM, And this is kind of the same idea with this property thing. Like, I feel like if you give the players something like this, if they've invested into it, so like they've put in some resources, they've spent resources such as time and intention into developing some kind of asset, I think you got to be respectful of that asset to an extent. Like, you can have things happen to it, but, make it an opportunity for something bigger give them a chance to have some advantage from the experience. If you need a plot point that involves destroying their thing, give them something else, as a recompense later on. Do something that makes it feel fair. And I think that's what we tried to do in the LARP back in the day.
Yeah.
Who knows what success or not.
Yeah, it was hard with LARP because you had 50 players. They were all so different. It was really hard to curtail that to their specific needs when you have that many people, because then you also have to be fair from player to player over 50 people as well. And sometimes if you're in a larger org, also being fair from chronicle to chronicle. So it was really tough to balance that out. I think, player assets are just an interesting thing because, if you look at our Everstorm game, we had a ship. Mm-hmm. And then our DM tossed that ship onto an island and broke it into 1 trillion bits. And he gave us another ship. And I don't think he intended on us disassembling the nearly complete ship to rebuild our old broken ship. But that's what we're now doing. So I think he had to a little backpedal it himself to be like, these guys are going to be on this island now for ever. So we're going to be there for quite a while. So sometimes player assets, as a DM, you change the way you got to approach your game a little bit if they start looking at it a completely different way. You firebomb that thing to get them out the door to head down your dungeon and Waterdeep. Next thing you know, they're over there contracting every guild in town to rebuild the thing better. It's
well, and that's the other interesting thing about it too. Is that as adventuring groups in D&D, the typical style, you're not the stay-at-home type. You're not the I'm a farmer. I got a field I got to tend to, because those people don't go adventure. They take care of the farm. If you're running a bar, you're not out kicking indoors and going into the dungeon. That puts some real strain on the adventurer career, And so it's an interesting thing to introduce into a game. And, if you're doing an intrigue-heavy social game, then absolutely, assets and stuff, I think, are just phenomenal. They can really add a lot and give you a lot of places to play. I think in the more traditional, I say keep saying traditional, maybe it's not traditional, but the adventure kind of style game, or dungeon diving, or saving the kingdom kind of stuff, it feels like there's an element there where having these assets kind of detracts from that a little bit. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not. Maybe not, but
I do. I agree with it to the point where even in the middle of our Waterdeep game, I long for that adventuring that happens with Dungeons and Dragons games, because we're playing DIY, Waterdeep edition, and sometimes it's man, I really just want to go out and do this adventure stuff because there's only so much roleplay I could do in a city where you're buying stuff to fix up your house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the other thing too,
we turned into a lot of that too. It's
right.
Yeah, I think the other thing about assets is can be kind of strange, and one of the things our DM tried to duck around was that when you have an asset, the question becomes: is it one of the characters' assets, and therefore one of the players? Is it the group's? Is there some kind of hierarchy that gets created through ownership that maybe sometimes is a little uncomfortable? So, in our case, we had a boat, right? And was one of us in charge of the other characters on this boat? Well, our DMs decided to sidestep that by having a captain, right? So it wasn't our boat. We weren't in charge of anybody. We were just deckhands. Okay, cool.
First mate, but that failed on him too. So
true story. But then we get dashed on the rocks, or we had an opportunity to get rid of the captain. So, that started getting some interesting waters. How is the group going to deal with that? And what is your take? Do you feel like that's a comfortable space in your table, to have different levels of power between players and characters?
Yes and no. In the fact that it's kind of this... There are really two types of players, right? There's the leaders, and then there's the followers. In the fact that leaders are automatically going to be the forefront. They're going to drive the story. They're going to drive everything. Then the followers, you could take probably the prime example is Critical Role, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Critical Role has very clear leaders and very clear followers. There are these secondary characters that are still part of this main cast, but they just don't get that spotlight because they don't take it. So
Right,
when you talk about, does somebody lead or does somebody take that higher ranking, it happens every time. And the fact that that's just where the natural pecking order of this goes. Who's a leader, who's a follower. I will challenge that because I do have that in my game.
Mm-hmm.
I will challenge that and make some of these followers, if they're comfortable, be a leader. I will put them in that lead role so they have to come out and they get that chance to shine and they get that chance to be the leader if they're not comfortable just, reaching out and grabbing it themselves.
Yeah, giving somebody the opportunity to learn a new skill, giving them permission, I guess, is kind of the element to it. So I think a lot of players that are quiet feel like uncomfortable seizing the spotlight, And I think if you can create conditions where the spotlight just naturally falls on them, it can help get people out of that.
I agree, and 100%, because there's still social awkwardness with D&D. I mean, we're all nerds or geeks or whatever you want to say, and some of us are introverts and some of us are extroverts. Some of us are going to just reach out and grab it, and some of us are going to kind of wait and be passive and let that just come to you. And so it does give them the opportunity to get that chance. And it's only to the level they feel comfortable with. If they're not comfortable with it, they always want to be that, follower. Go ahead, absolutely do it. I mean, that's your call. You're in charge of your own character and your own being.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting because, as I was discussing earlier, I was watching the Aliens game on Jousm, the new Aliens. There is a captain, and there is one person who's in charge of that ship. And they all have these, because they're pre-gen characters. I also saw it with Jay Bruce, who just left to go to bed, so hopefully he'll get to hear this later. He was running Starfinder, and one of his players was the captain. So I think it's done more, and I think that when you have mature, kind of responsible role players, I think, it's not that big of a deal. I don't think it'd be a big deal in our game if my character Balrin wasn't such an asshole, but he is. So I think the rest of the characters are the players are okay, Dustin would do probably an alright job, but his character, nobody really wants to follow him. So it's just the situation is a little different for us right now, but, maybe they'll come around to him eventually, but, because the guy with the most skill is not necessarily the guy everyone wants to follow. But, you can have those situations occur, but I think there's a lot of games out there that require it almost. Like I said, I think the Aliens game, Starfinder, when you're playing those kinds of games where you are military or you have these sorts of things, I think those ranks have to be there to keep the feel of the setting alive if you're running those kinds of campaigns. So I don't think you can be afraid from having it happen, though. I don't think you can always... I guess my fear is if I was to DM too much of the captains and the lieutenants to keep the players all on the same level of rank, that I would be steering too much of the game, would be my fear of it if I tried to do that.
I can see that. Yeah. And I think what you're saying with the ranking is important. I think if a game has a system in play to have a character design element, so in Vampire was the status merit, if you invested into it, then okay, yeah, you got rank. You've spent into it. And I think at that point, players can view it a little bit more fairly. It's okay that this person's in a different hierarchical space than I am because they've invested in that. Whereas I think in some groups, and maybe it's not an issue in most groups, but I think in some groups, people would probably feel a little weird about having somebody stepping up and saying, I'm in charge of you. I get more say than you do.
I mean, even with the newest module or supplement that was released, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, you have positions on the ship, and one of them is a captain, and it'll be interesting to see. So Chris is running a one-shot that's a high seas adventure that has 4 people that each have their own role.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how this is going to work in the fact that, 1, we don't know each other. So this is a brand new group, never played together. And 2, somebody is the lead and somebody has to follow. So I let somebody else be the lead because I know I can follow the lead.
Now it's not tabletop games, but there's a lot of card games out there where these different roles are set up and if you take like a ship, like captain, quartermaster, like those roles can be set up, but each one has its own specific advantage. So like, I think as long as different roles have their own advantage, where like the Masters of Arms gets control over this that the captain doesn't necessarily have. And a really good example of that, and the show is older, but I just recently binged through it, was Black Sails. If you ever watched Black Sails, they do a really good job of demonstrating just the amount of political power people outside of the captain have on a ship. And so, like, if you can create that scenario with your assets, whether it's a home, a castle, a starship, whatever it is you're running, like, if you can create that dynamic of power balance between the captain and other people on the ship, like, then it's not nearly as big, it's not nearly that hierarchy that you're thinking of. Like, even being the cook is a big deal in that ship, you know, like...
Right.
Yeah, if somebody's willing to make it that. Now, we are at the hour and 40-minute mark. How are we doing on time? You guys feeling good?
I feel like we've covered our topics pretty well, I think. Do you have anything else you'd like to add in there, Bob? You have anything else you want to talk about before we go?
No, I think it's been great. And, when we were first talking about an hour and a half, I'm like, man, that's a long time. And then you look at
Let me tell you.
An hour and a half.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It
I
is.
feel like we can easily go 2.5 hours.
We could.
Accidentally. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good conversation. Yeah, do we have any questions from the audience, I guess?
Here in viewer land? Oh, Bislab says, no, don't go. He still has 6 hours on his shift. Well, we can't help you out there for that much. I'll tell you what you can do, Bislab. You can go on YouTube, and you can find all of our past episodes, and if you haven't watched them all, you can watch those. They'll help keep you company while the rest of us normal people go to sleep.
Yeah, and if you haven't checked that out, TT2KB on the YouTube has all of our past episodes cut up. So I've cut them first half, for the first topic as one video, and then the second half in its own video. So even though we're doing usually an hour and a half, 2 hours here, it's a little bit more bite-sized. But it's all there in a big playlist. So if you want to watch them all in one sitting,
now when you search for us on YouTube, you have to type the whole thing out: tabletop, and then the number 2, and then keyboard, and that will get you there. You won't find it under TT2KB. You have to type it all out there. So
yeah, lots of ways.
Right there on the screen, but I just want to make sure it's clear to people. So.
And let's plug your stuff one more time, just to make sure it's really just seared in there. So Bob, how can we find you?
Pretty much anywhere you search dadbod DnD. We're on Podcast Land, we're on YouTube, Twitter. We don't do much on Instagram, but we do have a Discord, which the link is over on our Twitch, which is twitch.tv/dadboddnd, all one word.
Nice. Did you say clean up those beards for Satine?
What? I jokingly thought that today. I was like, man, if she comes on the show, I'll have to shave. Maybe,
I'm not going clean shaven, I'll tell you that much. I'll trim it. I'll make it nice and neat. I'm gonna have facial hair though, man. Come on now.
Too bad.
You can't take my beard.
I did hear a joke that beards, which I have one, we all have one,
Mm-hmm.
are the male push-up bra.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, it just makes us look better.
It just
his jawline.
I meant to share this on your Discord, Bob, and I don't know if I did, but I saw an article the other day where studies were done, and dad bods are more fashionable now than they have ever been, just in general in the public. So it's you guys are right on the zeitgeist of American culture right now with the dad bods.
Oh, absolutely. Dustin, you doing anything these days besides the wisdom check?
Boy, am I. Let's see. Where will you find me? You'll find me here on TT2KB playing Everstorm in a week and a half now, or 2 weeks, on Saturday for game 18, which has not yet been named by our DM. He needs to get on that. You'll also find me playing a one-shot for Bob here, and that's going to be August 7th, right? I believe.
It's important to know.
It's a ways off. I'm still working on the maps and stuff, so, I believe it's August 7th. You'll also find me pretty soon playing on Defenders of Cobalt. I'm playing with DM Chuck in a 4E game that's going to be taking place on some Thursdays. I believe that'll be streamed over on Defenders of Cobalt. And I might even have a few other places I'm going to pop up soon, but nothing that's been officially signed on yet. So I'll make those announcements at further wisdom checks when they're more solidified. And of course, you can also find me at Plague State, where just today I started streaming ESO, and I suck. You should watch it. It's pretty funny. Been playing ArcAge for 6 years, and boy, is that a different game to jump into from ArcAge. So you can come watch me play ESO horribly right now too, and I'll be probably streaming that again more during the day tomorrow just to get levels.
It's hard to start at the bottom, man. And then for me, when you don't catch me here on the Wisdom Check and you don't catch me on the Everstorm campaign, you'll find me on my YouTube channel, occasionally putting out some content there of Let's Plays. And right now I've been doing some Ark Survival Evolved, so play on a server with Fox Sesto and Uncle Apex and No Play Jack and some of the other YouTubers out there. And we're also doing a mod version of a game called Primal Fear right now, so it's a pretty interesting time. I'm enjoying it. That series is a little bit more player versus environment, and by a little bit I mean entirely PvE. Whereas the other server I'm playing on, I'll hopefully be making some event videos, is a full-on PvP server. So if you're into video games, check me out at Rain Survives on YouTube. And aside from that, I mean, great talk tonight, guys. Had fun. Glad to have you, Bob.
God, I hope we made Clint proud.
Yeah.
I hope when he watches this later tomorrow on his way to work, he's got a 3-hour drive or something in the morning. I hope he watches this or whatever, and he's like, man, he pulled it off. It actually worked.
Well, we all had pictures tonight, so that's one step better than what I did.
That's we're improving by the day. So
no, we miss having our tech guy for sure. He's a legend. And by the way, if you haven't seen what our tech guy put together for our last game session, thanks for the bits, Ink, much appreciated. If you haven't seen it, our tech guy wanted to learn how to use Unreal Engine and made
it's amazing,
entire video of our campaign in a 3-dimensional world with freaking props and like a voiceover narration, and it is amazing.
It's really amazing. I don't have the ability to replay it right now for you, or I would. But
oh man, it's so good. So it's on our Discord. If you haven't found it yet, go to our Discord.
Yep.
We'll drop a link in there somewhere here. Yeah, it'll be in the panels at least. At the bottom.
I can't do it right now because if I move Discord, it's going to move all of our cameras, and then Clint will be mad.
True story. But, look for all that info in the bottom of our promos. Check us on the Discord. Join in the conversation over there. Be part of the community, and help us grow this thing. And we'll catch you next week with who we got next week, Dustin.
Oh, I don't know. I can't look at the schedule right now. I know who it is. I'm joking with you. Next week, we have DM Reagan from Getting Dicey joining us all the way from New Zealand.
Nice.
17-hour time difference. It's actually closer to just go the other way. To think of it not 17 hours, but just like that he's he's in the future. He's in the future is what he is.
Yep.
So
that'll be cool. And check us out for that next week on our normal time, right? Monday at 10 p.m. So.
Yeah. He's making it work so he can be here with us. So
that's crazy.
Turns out it's actually not as bad for him because, like I said, it's actually just like 7 hours different for him. So it's not as bad as it sounds.
Fair dues. So anyway, thanks for coming out, guys. Thanks for the chat. Thanks for the bits. Thanks for the gifts and all that kind of stuff. And we'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.